All right, good morning guys. So we are now starting Coil Method. So we finished up our last project with Pinch Method, and now we're going into Coil Method. So we will be doing about 3 to 4 projects using Coil Method, doing a variety of different types of coiling. So coil pots are basically taking rope-like strands of clay, we call them coils, and we stack them one on top of the other, and then we blend them together on the inside so that they stick together. We won't need to cross-hatch and slip as long as you blend together well. And the manner in which you stack the coils will create the shape of the pot that you design. So you can add handles to them, you can make lids on them, they can be functional, they can be decorative. It's truly up to you as to what you envision. As you stack the coils, you can create vases, you can create bowls, you can create cups or mugs, entirely up to you. So the way we're going to start this is we are going to make a slab. I'm not going to spend time going through how to make a slab. I did that in a previous video. So I have a bit of a slab here. And we're going to make the base of our coil pot using a slab. Why do we make it with a slab? Because what I found is when you coil the base, the way the clay tends to dry and shrink, it will split apart and you'll get cracks in the bottom of your coil pot. If you start with a slab base, you won't have that problem. So that's why I start my coil pots with a slab. So I've got a slab, previous slab that I had here. So now you want to decide if you want to make a round pot, if you want to make an oval pot, a square, a rectangle, a circular pot, it's up to you. I like to find a lid or a coffee cup or a glass or a tin can, something that you can use as a template to cut out your base. I'm going to use this lid. I'm just going to lay it on here. I'm going to take my needle tool, X-Acto knife, whatever you're using to cut things out with. I'm going to go ahead and trace around it, and I'm going to cut this out. And this is going to be the base of my coil pot. That's just some spare slab. I'll save that so I can use that again. And as I work on this, I'm either going to put it on a wood board, a plate, some newspaper, plastic lid, whatever you might have at home. Plastic lids are great because it's not going to pull the moisture out of the clay. It's going to help keep your clay nice and soft as you work on this. A wood board quite often is going to pull the moisture out of your project, and so it'll start to dry out more. I'm going to start with the wood board, but I'll probably switch over to the lid when I go to bag it up at the end. So now the next step is you need to make coils. Now if we were here in school, we have what's called an extruder. It's like a grown-up Play-Doh machine where we can put a template or a die on it, put our soft clay down inside, squeeze down the handle, and we can make ourselves nice coils. But since we're not here at school at this point, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. So you're going to take some of your nice soft clay that you've gone ahead and you have wedged and prepared nicely. You can take a piece of it, doesn't have to be large, and you're going to go ahead and start it off by rolling it between your hands. Then using the palms of your hands, you can use your fingers, but I find mine tend to press in and leave marks, so I try to use the palm of my hand. And I'm going to roll back and forth on my tabletop, my surface, my board, whatever you're working on at home. And when I roll it back and forth, I'm trying to roll it a full revolution or a complete cycle. If you just go back and forth in a small spot, it's going to flatten down the clay and it's going to become oval instead of round. And sometimes you'll hear it slapping against your board as you do that. So try to go in a full revolution and work your hand from side to side. As you do that, it's going to stretch out the clay and it's going to help you make a nice coil. Now our goal is to make our coil about 1/2 inch thick. So don't go too thin because it won't leave you anything to pinch and blend your coil pot together. Something similar to this. Now sometimes what I do also is I will have some water next to me and I'll squeeze out the water from my sponge and then I'll go ahead and I'll sponge over my coil after I make it. The reason being is as I'm rolling it on the board or my surface, sometimes between my hand and the surface, it pulls the moisture out of the clay. We want to keep the clay soft and moist so that it's pliable, it'll flex, it'll bend without getting cracks. So I will go ahead after I make my coils and I will go and sponge on all sides of it to make it nice and soft. Then what I'll do is I will keep a plastic bag handy and I will go ahead and store it there and keep it covered up while I make coils. I prefer to make several coils all at once and then start my project rather than make a coil, wrap it, blend it, make another coil. That way I can try to get my coils to be all nice and uniform. Okay, so I've got my slab bottom made and I've got my coils made, so now we're going to go ahead and start the project. So before you actually start coiling, do try to have in mind a shape that you're trying to create. If you want it to just be a straight cylinder, that's perfectly fine. If you want it to go out more of as a bowl, that's fine also. If you want it to taper in to be more of a vase shape, that's perfectly fine. But have that vision of what you're trying to create, because that's going to help you in terms of knowing how to stack your coils. If you don't know what you're actually trying to create in terms of a shape, and you just start randomly stacking coils not knowing what you're trying to make, then you don't know in what manner to stack your coils, straight on top of each other, on the outside edge, on the inside edge, or when you're done or not done, because you're not really sure what you're trying to make. So try to have a vision in your head of what you want to actually create before you start. Okay, so I'm going to start with one of my coils, and what I like to do is have a knife handy. I use this little X-Acto knife, but you could use a kitchen knife, whatever you have handy at home, and I cut the little tip off of it. I like to start with a straight edge here. So then what I'm going to do is take my coil and I'm going to set it on top of my slab. Don't put it on the outside edge. Put it on top of it, okay? And then we're going to wrap it to match that outside edge of our slab, because that's the shape we want, right? We want it round. If it were rectangular, then I'd be matching it to a rectangle. If it was square, I'd be matching it to a square. Then I'm going to come back to where I meet the first one, or the beginning point, and I'm going to cut this. Now some people will just keep wrapping, and they'll have kind of a little raise where it goes up to the next level. I like to go ahead and trim mine and start the next level. I just feel like it makes it for a nicer, neater, cleaner looking coil pot, and it doesn't have like one side gets higher than the other. It helps it to stay more level. Either way is fine. There isn't a right or a wrong. Like I say, just in doing it, I like it better that way. So you can see here that there's a little bit of a line. So I like to take my finger before I start anything else and just try and blend that together with my thumb. It's okay if it shows a little bit, but I don't want a big giant gap there, okay? So here's the tricky part. Now up till now, anytime we've joined clay to clay, we've always cross-hatched and we've slipped it. And then we've pressed the two pieces together. Since our clay is nice and moist, we don't have to cross-hatch and slip each coil. We're going to do what's called blending. And blending basically is smearing the clay together. So I'm going to move this as close as I can. Hopefully the camera picks it up. So I'm going to take my hand and support on the outside. I'm going to take my thumb or my finger, and I'm going to go ahead and take a third to half the coil, and I'm going to pinch down. And I'm going to pinch down and smear it into the slab. And then I'm going to go ahead and just turn it, and I'm going to do that all the way around. And what that's going to do, because the clay is nice and moist, is it's going to smear it together and it's going to join it so that I don't have to cross-hatch and slip every single layer. Now, if you want to cross-hatch and slip, I suppose you could, but the slip will kind of ooze out as you do it, and that will wreck the design on the outside. We want to blend so we do not see any separation of the coil from the slab bottom on the inside or as we stack the coils. We do want to keep the coil design on the outside, okay? So we're not blending the outside, just blend the inside. So once you've done that, go back with your finger. You could even use a sponge if you want, and smooth this together so that it stays nice and neat. It's easier to do this now as you build each coil to keep it nice and neat rather than to try to build your entire project and then go back down inside and smooth it later. Because sometimes you can't get your hands inside depending on what shape you're making and what you're doing. So if you can sponge and smooth this out now, or just blend it well with your fingers, that's the way we want to go. Okay, so we got our first layer done. So we're going to take another coil, and I'm just going to go straight up with this one initially. I'm not going to do any shape to it. I'm not going to change it. I'm just going to make it a straight cylinder. So if I'm going to make this a straight cylinder, then when I put the next coil on, I want to stack it directly on top of the previous coil. Okay, so I would go ahead, cut the tip again, just like I did on the first one, line it up so that it sits right over the top of the previous coil, wrap it around to meet it, and then we'll trim it. And as you do this, try and be as careful and as neat as you can in handling your coils. You'll find that the more perfect you can leave your coil as you're doing this, the more perfect your project is going to look when you finish it. If you are rough with your coils and you're just kind of slapping them down and banging them against the table, it's going to flatten and dent and change the shape of your coil. And then it's not going to look as nice. So we want to try and keep them as nice, as clean, as perfect as we can. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead. It doesn't have to line up and start in the same spot as we did on the first coil. You can move around. That's perfectly fine. So again, we're going to try and blend that little seam together where we cut it. Okay, so just like that. And then again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put our hand here and support it. Take our thumb or forefinger, whichever is easiest for you to use, whether you're right or left-handed, but support it so it doesn't change its shape as you blend it. And then just take your thumb and smear down and blend that in. It's probably kind of tricky for you guys to see here. I might be in the way, but just take your finger and pinch and blend it into the coil that's underneath it. Okay? So I'm going to do that here the best I can. And hopefully the view of the camera is going to be enough that you guys can see and get the hang of it. So we're pinching this down into the coil that's underneath it. Again, about a third to half of your coil is what you're smearing down. And that way you know it is attached and blended into what's underneath it, and it's not going to come apart when it dries. So to hold this up a little closer to you guys, hopefully that's good, and you can see it there. And I've gone ahead and pinched this one down to the next one. So now I want to go back and smooth and clean this all up inside. So again, I'm just going to take my thumb or my finger, and I'm just going to support the outside, and I'm going to smear it together. So again, this is easier to do as you go each coil. Don't build your entire project. I know I already said this, but don't build the entire project and then try to get down inside and clean it. It's just too awkward that way. Okay? So you would just continue doing this coil by coil, stacking, blending, stacking, blending, stacking, blending, until you get to whatever height you want. If it's going to be a coffee mug, maybe about 4 inches high. If it's going to be just a straight cylinder vase, maybe 6 or 8 inches high. It's up to you. Now, the narrower your base and the more narrow your pot, the easier it's going to be to get height without using a lot of clay. If you make a really big base, you're using a lot of clay to wrap around that base. It's going to take a lot more clay to get height if you're trying to go tall. So There's no right or wrong. It's just whatever shape, whatever you want to come up with, whatever diameter or size you want. So I would continue working on this, trying to keep it as neat as I can, continuing to stack my clay. So that would be a cylinder coil pot. Now, if you want your coil pot to go out, then what you're going to do, and I'm just going to do this as an example, I'm not going to actually blend it and build it, but what you would do is you would take your coil, and when you go to lay the next coil on, instead of putting it directly on top, you would go ahead and you would put it on the outside edge of the one that's underneath it, about halfway, okay? Don't go completely out, just a little at a time. And what will happen is it will start to stair step out. And so as you build each one, you'll stair step it out a little bit more. So if I don't blend this and I just go ahead and wrap this on top, which would not be the way I'd do it if I was blending it, I would cut it and I would do each one separate. But you can go ahead and just, as you stack each layer, you stair step it out just slightly and it'll start to go out. Okay, so if I wanted to make this into a bowl, I would just slowly stair step out and then blend the inside as I put each one on, and it would start to curve out into a bowl shape. If I want this to go in, I'm going to do the opposite. When I go ahead and put my coil on, instead of putting it on the outside edge, I'm going to put it on the inside half. And as I wrap it and build it, it's going to start to stair step inwards. Okay, so I'm trying to show you guys this without actually having to take the time to stop, blend, trim, do the whole thing. I just want to give you guys the idea of what you would do if you want to make it go out or make it come in. So obviously if you're making it come in and it's getting tighter, it's going to raise up quicker and you're going to get a taller shape using less clay. So you can see it starts to stair step in. But again, I would do each level, cut it, blend it, do the next level, cut it, blend it, and so on, building it in. So you could do that to make yourself a small vase. It could start out, and then it could step in, and then your lip could come out, and you can make yourself a little bud vase, or a posy vase for some sort of flowers. If you want, you can make it like a little bit taller, kind of like a genie bottle. If you wanted to go taller and narrower yet, it could be something like this, and it could be used for a flower vase, or you could pinch a spout onto the end, put a handle on it, and it could be used to pour maybe olive oil or creamer, whatever you might have in mind. And again, same idea. You're stepping this out and then bringing it in and then finishing it off, and it makes for a nice vase for some flowers. Okay, so that gives you an idea. For, like I say, you can just go straight up and make a cylinder, blend the inside, make it nice and clean. You can take a couple little coils, you can put them side by side on your table, and as they're side by side, you can blend them together, just like you would as if you were stacking them. Blend it together and make it nice and joined. Then I would smooth over this, and then you can shape this into a handle. So you can find yourself something to put underneath this to support it, or you can just shape it, and then you could trim it with your knife or whatever you're using, and you could let this get leather hard, just to firm up so it will hold the curve. And then you can go ahead and you can attach this as a handle onto a lid. The lid was made from a slab, again, so that it doesn't get cracks when it dries. You can make little coil handles that go on the outside that could make this like a little baker, so you can put it in the oven. You can do it in the same idea in a square shape, okay? So it's entirely up to you, but you just want to make sure as you're making your coils that you're wrapping it, cutting it and trimming it, blending it together well, and then starting with the next one. And every time you add a coil, you stop and you blend it together real well and you smooth out the inside. Okay, I hope that gets you guys a good start to this. On this first one, we want to make sure that all of our coils are going, excuse me, horizontally, okay? Now you will see some coil pots, and we'll be doing these in future assignments, where we are going to switch up our coils, the direction that they go. But for this first assignment, I want to see all the coils laying down, being stacked horizontally. All right, I hope that answers any questions you guys might have. Obviously, when we're in class, you can feel free to ask any questions if you have some, but I hope that the angle gave you a good view, and I'll see you on the next one.